Denis Leary, hello.
Hey, guys, how are you?
You know where Lenny Clark performed not 2 weeks ago?
Where?
DB's Golden Banana in Peabody.
In Peabody.
It's a strip club. It was a Monday night, and it was Lenny Clark at DB's Golden Banana in Peabody.
How about that?
Well, it's the story of show business, right? DB's Golden Banana one night, TD Garden.
I just want you to know that Lenny isn't taking this lightly, that he's out there, he's working on material.
He's getting his set ready for the Garden.
That's exactly it. He goes, DB's Golden Banana just north of the Garden. And, he brought out a notebook, I'm told, from some of the ladies that worked there. He brought out a notebook, and he was working on stuff. So it's a real tight, what is he doing, like 10 minutes? It's a real tight 10 minutes for the Garden. Trust me.
You've got some sources, it sounds like, at DB's Golden Banana.
I was there, and they were very proud that the following Monday, Lenny Clark, and I just quit drinking like 5 months ago. So
what are you doing at a strip club if you just quit drinking?
I was with a guy that it was insisting that we go to a strip club, and I thought, you know what? I've never been to one sober before, so I went to one. It wasn't a lot of fun.
It was a party night. They started at the Kowloon, and I'm not joking.
It was the first time I'd ever been to the Kowloon, and then I was at DB's Golden.
Way to really test that sobriety.
I did.
Kowloon and then to a strip club. What is it, 1982 in your head?
I'd never done it. Alcohol has been a barrier for me at DB's Golden Banana.
He's trying to catch up.
God.
It's the life I've always been meant to live. This is how I look at it, Dennis.
Well, speaking of Lenny Clark, we had Stephen Wright in studio a couple of months ago. And
talking about his book.
Oh yeah. But I mean, I think we spent it's funny because we talked a little bit about his book, but we spent almost an hour just talking about like what the Boston comedy scene was like back in the day, and he recommended that movie or the documentary When Stand Up Stood Out. I finally watched it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty good document, and it really tells the story about how that whole scene started and. Steve was a big part of it. I went to college at Emerson College with Steve, and he was the reason I got into stand-up because, Steve was a really shy guy in college. He was a great writer, and he made some really interesting short films in the film department there. But we were probably 6 months after I graduated. Somebody said, "Hey, Steve Wright's doing stand-up comedy," and I was like, "What?" And they said, he's doing stand-up comedy at this Chinese restaurant in Inman Square. And I was like, what are you high? So we went there, and sure enough, Lenny was the host. Mm-hmm. And Steve Wright got up, and, as you know, it was genius. And I was like, wow, man, I should try this. Steve was so brilliant and so one of a kind, mm-hmm. But Lenny was, it was unbelievable. Lenny as a host was just, outstanding. So I thought, I'm going to give this a shot. And I always give credit to Lenny, Don Gavin, Steve Sweeney, and Mike Clark, who was Lenny's brother, who booked the Ding Ho. Those guys always told me to keep coming back. Because I bombed like my first 10 times, but they saw something in me and they were like, keep coming back. Lenny kept putting me up on his Wednesday night show, which is the show that Steve did. So it all goes back to the Ding Ho, man, a Chinese restaurant. That's where the Boston comedy scene was born.
Well, they described in the documentary, and you as well, because you're a big part of it, as that Wednesday night open mic night being borderline chaos.
It was first of all, because of Lenny, it was sold out, right? Like Lenny really became a star. Him, Steve Sweeney, and Don Gavin were the three. The big stars. They were selling tickets. Steve was, again, so original. And Steve wasn't going to host the show, but those guys hosted their own nights. Lenny's Wednesday night literally was just sold out. I mean, like weeks in advance. And he'd put up like 10 guys. He'd put up 5 established guys and then 5 brand new people. And I can't even tell you, man, some of the insanity that went on. Like, his sets were not, ever structured. So he never did the same set from week to week twice. He would just whatever was on his mind. One time he got the Denver boot on his car, right? And somehow got it off and walked on stage with the Denver boot to start the show. Fights would break out, because Steve Sweeney, which I loved him for, some guy would heckle Steve Sweeney. He would dive off the stage and start beating the crap out of the guy. Right in the audience during the show.
God.
I know, it was awesome, dude. You never knew what was going to happen.
Who did you? Because you were so you had graduated from Emerson. Who did you guys all look at in that crew and go like, this guy's going to be big, if anyone?
Well, Steve was. Everybody would tell you Steve was so original and so brilliant that, not that we knew he was going to go to the Tonight Show and break records by going on the Tonight Show once and then a week later again, which was unheard of at the time. But you knew something was going to happen with Steve just because he was just so brilliant. He was like a diamond, waiting to be discovered. Lenny, for certain.
Right.
Don Gavin was just, from the get-go, just so funny, so tight. His writing was unbelievable. And Sweeney, as a comedian, never mind as an actor, I mean, his act was total insanity. I mean, Steve, you just never knew what was going. Like I said, some guy would heckle him. Normally with a heckler, you go back and forth, right? And you put the guy down. Steve would just dive off the stage. Fight the guy, which you get. I mean, the first time I saw that, I was like, this is awesome. Like,
thank God there's no camera phones. There's no phones on our cameras.
I know. So that was those guys, Barry Crimmins again, Jimmy Tingle, which was those guys were the original guys. My class was the next class. Jimmy Tingle, you just knew, even before he started doing political stuff, he was just a force to be reckoned with. There was just so much talent everywhere. I mean, think about it. Kevin Meaney, Kenny Rogerson, Lauren Dombrowski, Mario Cantone,
Bobcat Goldthwait. I know there was a big thing about him in there too.
I mean, Tom Kenny, who became the voice of SpongeBob SquarePants. I mean, the talent was Paula Poundstone.
It was it was like everyone who was on the earliest incarnation of Comedy Central had Boston ties of some kind.
We thought it was just one of those things, right? Because there was just so much talent, so much insane talent. Mm-hmm. And then the next class behind us started coming in. That's Bill Burr, Patrice O'Neill, Bobby Kelly, Mark Maron, those guys. You're like, wait a minute, Janine Garofalo, Louis C.K. And you're going, there's something going on in Boston. It's just, it was out of control.
Well, I love, Dennis, how you guys were juxtaposing the crowd that would show up at the Ding Ho and Nick's Comedy Stop. I guess Nick's Comedy Stop was a different breed of human being that would show up there, correct?
Yeah, and of course a much bigger club. So that was like, you have 500 seats, a giant, it was like a real nightclub, I mean? It wasn't the Ding Ho, but, that was because the scene just blew up. So Nick's was just its own. It was his own trip.
That was like Revere's best, right? The way it was described was just angry people from Revere.
I'll tell you what, they were a tough crowd, but they were again sold out. So that was one of the first times. That was the first time I saw Sam Kinison before he became famous, because Lenny had gone out to L.A. and was starting to do television, and he. Mike Clark, his brother, said, "Hey, Lenny's bringing back this guy from Texas. He's supposed to be amazing, Sam Kinison." So he brings Sam Kinison. The first set that Sam Kinison did in Boston was like on a Thursday night at Nick's Comedy Stop. So, and even he was like, "Man, this crowd is insane." I'm like, "This is Boston, man." The audience in Boston has always been true. They will let you know when you're funny, and they will sit there and stare at you if you're not making them laugh, And the only way to solve a heckler is you got to be good, or like Sweeney, dive off the stage and fight the guy.
That's right.
Yeah. And then, you might be out for a while because the jaw's wired shut or something. I understand.